Welcome to the Bethel Church Sermon of the Week. We hope you enjoy this message by Pastor Eric Johnson. For more information about this podcast and other resources, visit bethel.com.
All right, good morning. Forgot what time of day it was. We have any happy people in here? Yeah, good. How many are still here from the healing school? A number of you. Awesome. So good. Glad you guys are here. Although you're not supposed to be at this service, but that's another story. I'm kidding. Out of the joke. We have so many. Our other campus, our Cascade campus, we had last minute had to cancel that service, and so we were a little nervous about having enough spaces for everyone. So I'm glad it's working out. Okay. Well, we had an amazing week at the Civic, the Healing School, and we had a couple testimonies I wanted to share before we get into the Word this morning. We had a man, both these testimonies, they were in the first service here, and they both said, that's me. And on the last night, Friday night, I think 200 and something people got healed on Friday night alone. And that's one of a whole week. There's lots of people. And one man got up, I don't know how old he was, but I'm going to guess around my age, and he shared a story of how when he was dyslexic, and words of knowledge were given about dyslexia, and so he was prayed for. He came up, and the many people that came up to give testimony, and he stood on the stage and said, I've been dyslexic my entire life, haven't been able to read, and whenever I do attempt to read, I can't understand anything that I'm reading. It doesn't retain or anything. And he said he was prayed for in the back, and he grabbed a book, opened the book, and for the first time in his life was able to read without any complications. And then he said, I read about a paragraph, it freaked me out, I shut the book and threw it down. He said, because the first time in my life, I could actually understand what I was reading. It was comprehending. First time in his life. And he's around my age, so imagine that. And then he went on to say that in his teen years, he went on a bad acid trip for multiple days and just obviously fried a bunch of his stuff. And he said that whenever he panned the room or panned to left to right or right to left, everything is in frames. Nothing is fluid, like a fluid motion. And the Lord healed him that night, and he's doing this on the stage saying, I can see everything and not in frames. And then another lady got up, and we prayed for people with learning disorder, bipolar, just a bunch of stuff in that area. And she said, she got up and she said, she was in the back at first service. She said, I'm been diagnosed bipolar. And tonight, when the people prayed for me, I felt something lift and change. And then I felt everything come into one. She said that she described it. She said, I feel like I'm two people. But tonight, I feel like I'm one person. One thought, one person, everything's clear. And so she gave her testimony saying that she was healed on Friday night. And those were two of many, many miracles that took place. Lots of physical healings as well. We had a lady that had a severed Achilles tendon and had surgery to repair it, but didn't get full mobility, couldn't jump on it, couldn't do anything, very limited. And she was jumping on the stage on that foot. And she wasn't able to do that before. I mean, it was Twinview, just over at Twinview campus. And a lady was there that she came for the healing school. She had a significant accident happen that really messed up her neck and would never sleep a whole night. And I don't know how many years went by. And she grabbed me out of coming to this campus. She said, it's been 4 nights in a row. I've slept all night with no pain. So it's awesome. It's such good stuff. And at the end of the session or meeting today, if you need a miracle in your body, we're going to have our teams up front and we're going to go for it. All right, if you have your Bibles, if you want to go ahead and get it open to the book of Exodus. And I'll give you, go to 33, Exodus 33. Try not to read it at the moment. I'd like to do it together with you. If you were here a couple of weeks ago, I spoke a message titled, Hello Future. And if you were not here a couple of weeks ago, it is available on the podcast or Bethel TV. I would encourage you to listen to it because it kind of does lead into today. Although it's not a requirement to have listened to this to understand today, but they do kind of go hand in hand. 2 weeks ago, we began to talk about Hello future. The whole idea of our future is literally in the next second, minute, 5 minutes, next day. It's anything that's in front of us. We discussed how Christianity's view of time is very different than Middle Eastern religion's view of time is. If you take Hinduism, for example, their view of time is in a circle. It's in a circle motion. It's, that's where reincarnation, all those things, you die and you come back as something else. You never end. It just kind of keeps going and going and going. Christianity's view of time is literally the exact opposite in that there is a beginning and there is an end. And it's described, I don't like the word linear, but it is somewhat more linear. But how many know it's not flat and boring? Following Jesus is not flat and boring. It can take twists and turns and torpedoes. I mean, you can go in every direction, but you end up somewhere. And the whole idea is that we actually have in Scripture talks about a road, the idea of a road. We're traveling on a road going somewhere. And that's important because we actually are not designed to go in circles. I've never met one person in my entire life that follows Jesus or does not follow Jesus say this to me. I love doing the same thing in my life for the rest of my life. No one ever says that. Why? Because we as human beings are designed to go somewhere. It is how we are designed. And if we are just going around in circles, it was never God's intended plan, but something got you there, and God's plan is to get you to break that circle and get you going. That is the nature of God. So we talked a lot about time, as well as different generations and different ages interpret and look at time very differently. You talk to a 20-year-old and how they view time, it's very differently than how an 80-year-old views time. 20-year-old view time is, I've got a lot left. I can't even think about the end of my life. I just think I got life mastered, and all 20-year-olds got life all figured out. It's not until you hit your 30s you begin to realize you are so far from truth in that you actually don't know much about life. And you hit your 40s and 50s, you start going, wow, I don't have a lot of time left. My point is this, every age you look at time very differently. So the questions emerged a couple weeks ago was around this. Is time taking advantage of you, or are you taking advantage of time? Because God created it. He said there's a beginning in Genesis 1, and throughout Scripture he said there will come an end. So what's important for us to realize is that time was given to you, so what are you doing with it? And one of the easiest cop-outs is, I'm just too busy. Well, guess who's responsible for that? I'm just too busy. You are. We are. I am. So we talked a lot about time in that context, and last point about 2 weeks ago, and then we'll move into today. Paul actually talked about redeeming the time, which is a really interesting phrase in the Bible. Why? Because you can't get time back. You can't make more of it. You can't speed it up. You can't slow it down. You can't even buy more. But yet Paul says redeem the time. The word redeem actually means to redeem as we understand it, but the word time in that passage is kairos. And kairos moment, it's a moment in time, it's an opportunity in time. And Paul communicates we redeem the time because we live in evil days. The context is in a simplified form, there are two agendas on earth right now. One is to advance the kingdom, and one is to do the exact opposite. And the question is, are you redeeming time for the kingdom? Are you taking kairos moments by the horns, if you will? Are you taking those moments where God says now, and you take it now? Or are you letting the momentum of evil agenda take those moments from you? And Paul is saying you can redeem time by saying yes and holding on to the kairos moment that come in our lifetime. So we spent a bit of time on that. Today we're actually going to take a little bit different direction, but with the same theme of Hello Future. The title of today's message is Promises or Presence? Promises or Presence? And what I want to do today is I want to talk about a particular man in the Old Testament. But before we go there, I don't know if you're like me, but whenever I think of the word future, I can't help but go to the vastness of God. For some reason, that word just kind of, it's a switch gets flipped in me, and I start thinking about the vastness of God. I find myself Googling things about things I've never cared before, like how big is the universe, and how fast is it expanding, and what have we found out in the last 10 years, NASA and all the other space experts, what have we learned in the last 10 years that we've never known before? And one of the things I've noticed online when you start Googling stuff around this, they go, we thought we knew, but we actually don't know what we knew. And the point is, it just keeps, and that's like following Jesus. How many have noticed that when you said yes to Jesus, some questions were answered, but you got a whole lot more questions? Am I the only one? I mean, I'm so glad that when we said yes to Jesus, not all of our questions get answered. I'm so glad because it keeps us on edge. It keeps us in this posture of pursuing him because there's so much more. And so this whole idea of, so I think about the vastness. You take our solar system alone, just our solar system, and all the objects that have any form of mass in our solar system. The sun, people that know these things, they say that the sun takes up 99% of all the mass in our solar system. That's insane. That is incredible. And so everything else in our solar system makes up less than 1% combined. That's how large the sun is. And the sun is obviously not the largest star, sun, whatever you want to call it, in all of the universe. And yet there are, who knows, thousands upon millions of galaxies, and they continue to expand. Our eye, no technology can take it to the end of it. And then you ask, well, what's the smallest particle in existence? At one point, it would believe the atom, and then someone figured out how to split the atom. And now they're like, oh my gosh, there's smaller particles in the atom, and now there's particles within those particles. And I'm so intrigued by the idea that God is so in the vastness and largeness, and yet he cared about the particle that we'll never see with the naked eye. What's the point? God cares about you. There was a discussion between a Muslim and a Christian man once, and I think I read it, I heard someone share it to me. I can't remember where I got this, but it was a discussion about the differences between their God and our God. And the Christian man eventually spoke up and he says something to this effect. He said, the difference between my God and your God is you have to die for your God. My God died for us. But the whole idea that God does not care about you is so far from the truth. And when we look at the vastness, God creates everything in existence, and it continues to expand in every direction imaginable and things we will never understand. Now they're wondering if the universe is expanding at a different speed, because it's always been believed the speed of light. Now they're going, there's something else that's going on. We don't fully understand it. And yet God is so intentional with you, so with you, with you. The Bible talks about the zeal of the Lord, the eagerness of God. It's important to understand that some of you need to hear this. The eagerness of God, the eager that God has for you is greater than your desire to be alive and be successful. He is way more eager for your life than you could ever imagine. And so when we talk about future, so the question, as we move into our future, there are some important things to keep in mind. A lot of things, but today I want to kind of hone in on one. I want to talk about Moses today. Moses honestly was not in charge of his future. As you read his story, you begin to realize this guy he was sovereignly chosen by God for a very unique purpose. But even in the midst of that sovereignty, I can't help but wonder that Moses actually gained some things, and he made some decisions along the way that ensured that the sovereignty of God was going to happen. I think it's important for us to realize that as we are co-laboring with God, there are decisions, there are moments that are crucial that we make. So as we go into our future, I want you to keep in mind that there are certain things that we need to hold on to, adhere to as we move into our future. So let's go to Exodus chapter 33. We're going to start in verse 1. We're going to read the first 3 verses, and then we're going to ask you to go back to Exodus chapter 2. Then the Lord said to Moses, depart and go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt, to the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your descendants I will give it, and I will send my angel before you. And I will drive out the Canaanite, the Amorite, the Hittite, Perizzite, Hivite, and the Jebusites. Go up to the land of flowing with milk and honey, for I will not go up in your midst, lest I consume you on the way. For you are a stiff-necked people. This passage in Exodus chapter 33, in my opinion, is one of the most crucial, important moments in Israel's history, in our history, and honestly, I think in human history. It is one of the most important because it changed the game in this very moment. And I don't know if I have the skill set or the ability to convey in the next 30 minutes or so how important this moment is. So I'm going to do my best to try to help you understand the tension, the buildup that led to this very moment. This wasn't a moment that's just fleeting by. This was a moment that I would say human history, our Christian heritage, was aiming and it was about to come to a head in this very moment right here. So in order to understand that, I want to go back a little bit in Moses' life and try to paint a fairly quick picture of what led up to Exodus chapter 33. So go back to chapter 2 with me, and let's take a look at the beginning of Moses' life. In chapter 1, you can read it on your own, but in chapter 1 is a description of the plight of Israel. And what happened in the first few verses, there's a description around, remember, Joseph served Pharaoh, and Joseph's house moved to Egypt, and the nation of Israel began to occupy. And as they began to occupy the land, the verse said that the new king forgot about Joseph. And the new king looked out and saw the nation of Israel, the children of God, multiplying and growing in size more than the Egyptians. And he got scared that they would become more powerful than him. Now, there's a verse in there. Give me some, I think it's funny to mention. It's a little side note, but there's a moment in chapter 1 where it says, the more pressure they put on the nation of Israel, bondage, slavery, and stress, the more children they made. You know, there's certain coping mechanism with stress. And it's found in chapter 1. I'll just let that go. I had to. I was debating whether to mention it, but I'll be nice and not go any farther. But the more pressure they put on the nation, the more children they made. That's just the bottom line. And that's these people are about to take over us. So the new king of Egypt at that time said, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to tell all the midwives, the Hebrew midwives, that when a Hebrew woman has a baby, and if a baby boy comes out, you're instructed to kill the baby boy. Well, then they noticed baby boys were still being born. And finally the king said, what's up to the midwives? And midwives says something to this effect like, oh no, they're having babies before we get there. So you make lots of babies and you have them quick. And so then the king said, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to go out and kill all the baby boys. So then he sends his people out to begin to kill the baby boys. And this is where we pick up on Moses. Moses, his mom hears this. She tries to hide him for a period of time. Couldn't hide him anymore, so she makes a basket, covers it in tar, puts Moses inside, puts Moses in the river, and hoping the best for Moses, obviously as the mother, terrified for her son's life. Well, then God orchestrates this amazing situation where he makes Moses float to the back of Pharaoh's house. Pharaoh's daughter, servant, went out in the river to grab the basket, opened the basket, and they realized, oh, this is one of the Hebrew boys that they're trying to save his life. And her father is killing them, but she said, I'm going to take him into my house and raise him as one of my own. So the next 40 years, Moses is raised in the palace. He's raised in the Egyptian ways. It's fascinating. I think some of us are actually called to ministry schools where Pharaoh is in charge. Some of us are actually called to ministry schools where no Christians are leading it. Why? Because God looked at that house and said, I need to get someone on the inside, train them up in their ways, their language, their customs, the nuances, the unwritten rules about this culture, because someday I'm going to bring this culture down and advance the kingdom. So God said, I'm going to put Moses in. So Moses spent the first 40 years of his life being raised in the palace, so to speak, but not the palace that you and I want to be raised in. So Moses raised up. Now there's something interesting happens here around in chapter 2. We'll read it in just a moment. Moses, if you can imagine, I don't know if you're like me, but when anything happened to the town that I grew up in, which is Weaverville, I spent half of my life in that town. My roots go deep there, and my affection is there. Reading's my home, but Weaverville is my hometown. It's where I grew up. When anything happens in Weaverville, my heart turns there instantly. Some of you are from other countries and you're living in America for a while, and something happens in your country and your heart is turned there. I remember the first time I went to Norway. My family had lots of Norwegian, and I remember spending my first trip was 9 days, and I thought, I just found a part of me, now it all makes sense. There's something in us that we are connected to the very people by our bloodline, by our culture, and by our custom. So I want you to picture that Moses is raised up in Pharaoh's house, but every morning he had the dynamic and a big dilemma in that he looks out his window every day and he sees an entire nation being in bondage and slavery and being stripped of any of their dignity. And every morning he's like, why am I in the palace? Why do I have access to unlimited resources, but yet my own blood, my own people are under incredible bondage and slavery? So around 40 years old, Moses is walking around Egypt, and he sees an Egyptian beating up a Hebrew slave. And he intervened, and he looks this way, and he looks that way. And when he sees that no one there, he killed the Egyptian and buried the Egyptian. And so the next day, that's the question, why would he kill the Egyptian? I can't help but think maybe he did it because he felt guilty. He felt guilty. I know he's protecting his fellow countrymen, but I can't help but think that 40 years of pent-up dilemma, like, I got to do something. This is my social justice. This will make me feel better. So he killed the Egyptian, and so he thinks, okay, everything's good. The next day comes around, and he sees a Hebrew and a Hebrew fighting each other in an argument. And so he intervened, and then one of them said, are you going to kill us like the Egyptian you did yesterday? Now Moses is like, I've been found out. Who else knows? Well, word got back to Pharaoh, and word gets out that Pharaoh is now looking for his not by adopted son to kill him. And so Moses takes off running. Now Moses goes to a certain region outside of Egypt, and he actually goes to a well. Now what's interesting about wells in Middle Eastern culture, especially around this time, is that men would go to the well, obviously for water, but they would also go to, that's where you went to hook up with ladies. This is what they did. This is where you found your wife. You go to the well, and hopefully your wife will show up, and that's where it all began. And so I can't help but think that Moses maybe was looking for a spouse. I don't know, but he's at a well. And a conflict happened with some shepherds and some women, and this whole thing happened. And so Moses intervenes and saves the day, and then he pulls water from the well, and he begins to give water to whoever needed it. Well, the ladies went back to their village and told their dad, and they just said it. Let's read it in Exodus chapter 2, verse 19, verse 11 and 12. I'm sorry. Please forgive me, I am confused. Sorry. Chapter 2, verse 19. And they said, an Egyptian delivered us from the hand of shepherds, and he also drew enough water for us and watered the flock. We know that Moses is not an Egyptian, but what we do know that he dressed like them, smelled like them, talked like them, and looked like them. But underneath all of that layer of Egyptian, there was a Hebrew man that was crying out for his future. And so they said an Egyptian helper. So they went and brought Moses back, who they thought was an Egyptian, back to the village. And that's where Moses spends the next 40 years of his life. Now we're going to jump ahead to chapter, let's go to chapter 3, verse 1. Are you guys still with me? I'm trying to lay this foundation to get to this one point. Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. So here we have this moment. So Moses is about 80 years old now. He's been on the run for 40, but I would propose that he was feeling fairly secure and that he was not being chased anymore. 40 years, okay, I'm good, I'm safe, I've got a job, I got a family, I'm good to go. And in this moment, I can't help but wonder something inside Moses. He's wondering how his country is doing, how his people are doing. God obviously knows, because the Bible says that God could hear the cries of the people, and then he began to look for someone to set them free. And so in this moment, Moses is walking in the desert. It's at the back of the wilderness, which there is a deep part of the wilderness. I've shared this before. Heidi Baker said there's the bush in Africa. Well, in the Middle East, apparently there's the wilderness and the back of the wilderness. So Moses is way out in the middle of nowhere. And he's a shepherd, he's got his flock, and he sees a burning bush. Now the bush is burning. Now, just for the record, I've done some research on burning bushes, and even online, from different scholars, some say, oh, it's a normal occurrence, and some say, no, it's just a made-up myth. I have friends in the Middle East who I directly contacted and said, is it true that bushes in the Middle East spontaneously combust? And they said, oh, absolutely. It gets so hot here, 130-ish in the desert, and the certain molecular chemical structure of a plant, when it gets that hot, it actually bursts into flames. What's the point? This is a normal occurrence. This isn't like, oh my God, that's a burning bush. It was something normal. So I want to propose to you, Moses is doing his job as a shepherd, and he notices this bush burning. The Bible says Moses noticed it wasn't being consumed. It was on fire, but wasn't being consumed. We have to understand that God hasn't even spoken yet. There's no voice of the Lord yet. And Moses turned aside to look. Now, I want to pause here just for a moment. We have to understand that Moses did not turn because God said, Moses, Moses. Because that's easy. How many know when God says your name, it's like, yes, I'm here. That is so easy. In fact, I will cancel the rest of my life because you're here now. That's not what happened. A bush was on fire. Something so simple as Moses' curiosity is what stepped him into his future. I cannot stress enough the curiosity that is important, and I want to imply it's even required to step into the presence of God. Sometimes God doesn't need your curiosity, he just shows up. Other times he's like, I wonder if they're curious enough. So I'm going to manifest myself in a bush, no voice yet, and just let it burn and see if Moses does anything with it. And so Moses turned aside and he thought, that bush isn't burnt. It's on fire, but it's not being consumed. And then God said, Moses, and began to speak to him. I can't help but wonder, sometimes when God shouts, it's easy to hear him, but can you hear him because you're just curious? Now, I'll be honest with you, there have been times I'm curious and there's no voice. It was just curious. I can't tell you hundreds of times in a corporate gathering, I'm like, oh, I think the bush is burning. I think the bush is burning. An hour later, no, the bush is definitely not burning. Some of you know what I'm talking about. But you know what? I don't want to lose that curiosity. I don't want to do that 10 times and then go, no, I've seen that bush before. I've seen what's happening in this room right now, what's happening in this moment. It's happened 10 times and God never really showed up. So he's waiting to see if you'll look again. He's actually wanting to see, are you curious enough to look? So in this moment, Moses turned aside and he looks, and then that's where the voice came. And the voice came and said, Moses, Moses, take off your sandals because you're standing on holy ground. And Moses does. And then Moses received one of the most terrifying prophetic words of his life. He said, I am actually going to send you back to the place you ran from. And I'm going to have you set people free. Terrified. So Moses was making a long story short. He eventually obliges. He eventually says yes, and then begins the journey of Moses. Now, from Exodus chapter 3 to Exodus 33, a lot goes down that we do not have time to cover. But let me try to give you a synopsis of what happened, because I want you to understand the tension in chapter 33. We're going to go back to that verse. From 3 to chapter 33, Moses and the nation of Israel are introduced to one of the most incredible, phenomenal moves of God ever to hit the face of the earth. The things they saw, the things they heard, the things they experienced, to this day has yet to be manifested again that we're aware of. The 10 plagues, that's weird and crazy, and so what God wanted to do in that situation. Then you had the cloud by day, fire by night. Then you have the rock that would spew out water to give water to an entire nation. You have the Red Sea parting. I mean, you've got some of the most bizarre stories of an outpouring of God showing up. Now, from Exodus 3 to chapter 33 is less than 2 years from what I've gathered, which is not a lot of time. Why is this important? Because imagine going from absolute bondage to absolute outpouring of God. Imagine that, like literally just like that. You've gone from absolute bondage, over 400 years of it. Your entire ancestry is all they've talked about is bondage. And you're the one that stepped into the move of God. Imagine one day you go from bondage to complete move of God and bizarre. God showing up all over the place. Imagine the momentum. Imagine, oh my God, we're going to take on the world. We're going to our promised land. So this momentum is picking up, it's picking up. So by the time you get to chapter 33, it is clear as day that God wants to be amongst his people forever. Not in a moment, not in one meeting here, or one home group here, or one devotional time here. He wants to reside among his people. He's like, build me a place. I really want to be with you. Hey, I'm on the mountain. Come up and visit me. God is so eager to interact with humanity in this moment. So by the time we get to chapter 33, we run into a situation. God is a little upset. He's actually tired of people. He's like, you stiff-necked people. I'm so done with you. But then he's stuck. Why? Because he has a promise. And the promise is there's a promised land that's for you. And the verse we read at the beginning, he said, you can go, and I will send an angel before you, and they will destroy every obstacle in the way. Now, how many of you in this room, you have a prophetic word of promise that hasn't been fulfilled or realized, and there are some obstacles between you and that promise or prophetic word coming to pass? Yeah, everyone in this room has it. How would it be if one day, tomorrow morning, you do your morning devotion, to whenever you spend time with the Lord says, hey, I have some news for you. The promise I just spoke over you a long time ago, I'm going to send an angel before you, and he's going to destroy every obstacle so you can go. We'd be all, yes! Where were you 20 years ago? But I'm thankful you finally showed up. That would be our response. Who would not be excited about that? But that is not Moses' response. Moses was like, wait, time out. Did you say you're not going? And God said, I'm not going. And so Moses, that's in the beginning of chapter 33. By the time we get farther down chapter 33, Moses takes his tent, puts it outside the camp, and says, God, we need to meet. And so he goes there, and Joshua's present, at least for the beginning of this prayer meeting or this gathering. And Moses goes to God and said, God, time out. If you're not going, I'm not going. God, I don't know if you understand the tension here. Moses had the promise from the Lord that every obstacle will be removed. Every person, every obstacle to his promise will be removed. But God said, I'm not going. And Moses had to make a decision. Do I go or do I stay with him? I wonder how many times in life this is presented to us. I don't even want to think about it. Too scary. But how many times in life are we presented with, I'm going to achieve my promise, but I forgot the presence? Because when you're in momentum, you're like, yes, here it is here. Yes, favor. Yes, let's just do it. But we are so fractured. We are so distracted, especially in today's culture. Our pockets are buzzing nonstop. Our purses are buzzing. You sit in meetings now and you can hear a phone buzzing in the next office. We're constantly being pulled in every direction. In fact, I don't think we're curious anymore. I think we're just so worn out. And we're just trying to get our attention back. We're like, man, I just want my attention. I want to be able to pray for 60 seconds and not be distracted. That tells us that we are pulled in a million directions. If that is the case, then how good are we at paying attention of God coming with us or not? They say our attention, all marketing, social media marketing, the underlying thing is get their attention. If it's for 2 seconds, you've got it. Our attention is one of the most valuable commodities in today's age. And I just think we're so numb to stimulation, we forgot to check if the presence is with us. And so my challenge to me and my challenge to us as a house today is, hey, are we asking the question, hey, God, we're going over here, but we sure hope you're with us. If you're not, then we're going to wait on that one. Martin Scott was here several years ago, and he spoke on a Sunday night, probably 10, 15 years ago. And if you don't know Martin Scott, he's a wonderful international prophet from the UK, just a great friend of the house. And he's actually been one of those prophets that have sowed into the very foundation of soil of what God's doing here, and honestly, the revival that's sweeping the world as we know it. And Martin was here one night. He spoke, and I took him out to dinner. And it was just me and him, and he started this conversation. He said, Eric, I've been studying revival. I've been studying movements for a long time. And I have found 5 common mistakes that movements make. I'm like, oh, I'm all ears. Now, the problem is I don't remember 4 of them today. I'm like, I don't remember But I remember one. The one that stood out to me at Applebee's that night was this. Now, I just told myself this morning, you need to email him and find out the other 4, which I will. So I'll report back to you. He said, the one that I remember, he said, one common mistake that movements make is this, is when they think every idea is from God. Now, you might be asking, how do I know? How do I know if God's presence is with me? Well, it's pretty obvious when God's presence is with you. You see, a future without his presence, you'll have to sustain it. A future with his presence, he will sustain it. The story goes on where Moses said, God, listen, I'm not going anywhere without you. And then Moses goes into this other dialogue, not that much farther after. Middle of the chapter, he said, God, I want to see your face. Show me your glory. He didn't stop there. In the midst of a decision, he didn't say, okay, I'm not going anywhere, and then end of the conversation. He said, okay, by the way, I've been with you for a while. I want to see your face. If you haven't heard, the last 2 or 3 weeks, there have been increasing encounters taking place around this environment, in our homes, in our services. Last Sunday night, if you hadn't heard by now, which I'd be surprised if you didn't hear, last Sunday night, this room was divine chaos. There were people out everywhere encountering the Lord. And it was Bethel TV ended early because they had to for their reasons, and I understand it. But the service kept going and kept going. And then Monday, this week, upstairs hallway, a bunch of BCS kids were on the ground having encounters and trances with God. Wednesday night at youth group, there's something happening right now. And what I want to tell you, church, I think it's the burning bush. Are we going to be curious and look? Or are we going to say, oh yeah, we've seen that before? There are moments that are kairos moments where you take a hold of. And then there are kairos moments, they get a hold of you. We can't go any farther without him. There's enough momentum. There's enough fuel in the tank. There's enough, whatever you want to call that. There's enough of that. And it'd be really easy to keep running. And so I know for me, I've been making some pretty drastic changes. My schedule is very much the same, but it's more of an internal pace that I'm changing an internal pace. And I realized that I had lost or was losing my ability to be curious. I had lost my ability to go, oh. Because we're just so full. We're just running hard, doing amazing things. It's not like unintentional. It's not, it's amazing stuff. And we feel as a team, it's been a conversation, especially in the last few weeks, but even longer than that, it's just kind of heightened around this idea like, are we actually going at a pace in our lives as individuals and as a corporate family to be able to know when the bush is burning? Or is it just another one that we've seen before? So I want to challenge you as a person. This isn't to paralyze you to do nothing now. I can't go to the grocery store unless God's with me. I'm not implying that. So please think on another level with me today. I'm not trying to be funny, but it really is. Like, I know. How do you? No, listen. Are we moving forward into our future knowing that God is actually with us on this one? It's scary to think about. I know this is kind of I don't know if it scares you, but it scares me a little bit. You know, I mean, if you think about Moses' story, just give me a second here to get this out. If you think about Moses' story where the angel, God said, I'll send the angel before you and they will destroy every obstacle. Let's say they said yes to that. It's interesting that obstacle to remove, all the hindrances, resistance removed. Oh, God must be here. I don't know, that's just kind of oh gosh. I don't want to equate breakthrough, that means that God is actually with us. Although that's true. Are you guys with me for a second here? My message ended about 2 minutes ago. This is just me processing. So I want to be able to take all this back just in case, okay? But no, seriously, we have to understand, what is the presence? Do we know how to hear his voice? And God doesn't only talk in English. Do we know how to sense and know and, oh, there's the bush. Oh, God's in that bush. I didn't know that was a God bush, but that is the God. Like, do we actually know what the presence is? We definitely have ideas for sure. But I think the Lord actually wants to increase our awareness and our understanding around, when his presence goes with us, it looks like this. So if you're here today and you're going, how do you know? I thought I knew, but I think the Lord's taken us into a new season. And oftentimes, when we go into new seasons, it means we have no idea what it looks like. I mean, if we knew what it looked like, then it can't be a new season. Does that make sense? Oh, this is new. Oh, if you know what it means, then man, that's you've seen it before. So truly a new season means, okay, God, give us the schematics, give us the blueprint, teach us, train us to recognize what we don't even know yet. And so, Father, I pray for us as a house today. I pray for people on Bethel TV. I pray for people that are visiting with us today. Teach us how to be a people of presence even more. We know that this is something you've been so gracious with us over the years around the presence, but we also know that you're pulling us farther into our future. And we know that we cannot go into our future without you. We know that we cannot step into the promises without your presence. And I pray that today, every one of us will realize that the presence is more important than the promise. That your presence is more important than achievement, than getting somewhere. And we know you want to take us places. There's no doubt. We know that the whole thing of following Jesus means we start somewhere and we go somewhere. We know that. But we don't want to do it on our own. We don't want to just follow only the favor and only the breakthrough. We also want to make sure your presence is with us. Put your hand on the person next to you and just kind of agree with me and pray with me. Father, we pray for the people on our right and our left, that this would be a recalibration. This would be a centering, if you will, like, okay, we've got to make sure the presence over the promise and over the achievements. And we know that you're all about fulfilling promises and you're all about achieving things, but we want to be driven by your presence. So I pray that the life of Moses would be a testimony for us, would be a blueprint, would be a prime example of standing at the moment of one of the greatest promises fulfilled, centuries of buildup, and Moses still chose your presence. And so, Father, I pray for our family, Bethel TV family, podcasters, everyone that's listening to this, that we will continue to be a people of presence. And we know that you're taking us places that we don't even know what it looks like.
Thanks for listening to the Sermon of the Week. This weekly podcast is being translated into multiple languages. Please visit podcasts.ibethel.org.